Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a great Friday. I'm going to talk to you a bit about Texas Venture Labs today. I'll probably run 30, 45 minutes, and our plan is to open up for Q&A. I see many people in the audience, current and former students, a lot of people who've helped or contributed judging or mentoring to Texas Venture Labs, so I want to in particular recognize and thank those people. I'm going to tell everyone how, if they want to get involved in more of the entrepreneurship programs available through Texas Venture Labs, how to do that towards the end of the slides. I'd also like to recognize some of my coworkers who are here that first of all help run Texas Venture Labs and are also here to handle any Q&A you might have at the end if we haven't addressed it directly. And let me ask, if three of you could just stand up, please. Got Jim, Shady, and Ann. I'm going to talk more about them in the middle of the presentation, but again, if there's any help or any questions that we haven't addressed, please feel free to see myself or one of these three at the end of the presentation. So my goal here is to take you through Texas Venture Labs and all the things we do here on campus. The thing I want to emphasize is this is kind of the golden age of entrepreneurship on the campus here at University of Texas at Austin, and we are one of many programs out there. We focus in particular on graduate students, and we typically are educating them in a very applied manner. What does that mean? We will take people through coursework that enables them to start their own company. And what we mean by this is we'll take graduate students who are interested in getting a company off the ground, let them select from any of a number of courses they can take based on that. Then at the end of every semester, we put them through an investment competition. I'm going to go into depth in the Texas Venture Labs investment competition. The idea here is they run through the experience of raising money. Okay, so first of all, they've been through the coursework. They understand what a company needs to do to raise money. We break all the urban myths that are so prevalent out there. We show them how much work it is and how to get the work done correctly. And then, as they're in the process of graduating, if they choose to start a company, they've got a jump start on the fundraising process. I was in the venture business for a long time. I still am personally. And as I would say, it's about 90% of the real process. The 10% that's missing is, number one, the investors will actually read the business plan when you're here. And number two, the investors will actually tell you to your face what they really think versus the passive-aggressive approach most investors really take. So that's one track I'm going to talk about. So again, graduate students who want to get something off the ground. And we've had some great successes there. I'll walk through some of those companies. The other thing we offer graduate students is the ability to get on a cross-functional graduate school team. So first of all, what does that mean? That means we take graduate engineering candidates, graduate science candidates, School of Pharmacy, architecture, all over the campus, combined with law and MBAs. We put them together on cross-functional teams and we parachute those people into local startups. And we work with those companies on the same process we put our students through for fundraising. And we help provide the data behind the presentation. We help provide a lot of the facts. If you heard part of that video, you heard me explain that. There's this perception that all I really have to do is show up and kind of wing it and money will get thrown at me. The reality is it's a very systematic process. You have to have a lot of data. As the entrepreneur, you have to be in command of the facts. And what these graduate teams do is pull that material together for the entrepreneur to be able to go and present. So that's our accelerator. So what the grad students get is, first of all, the experience of working together on a team, very much like any startup where it's a combination of sort of business and law students along with technology students or hard science and engineering students. That's classically what's inside a startup. And then they also get to see the fundraising process firsthand, right? They get to see the sausage being made, so to speak. The great news about our approach and our process is if you look at that accelerator, at the accelerator we run, and again, I'm going to take you through all the details on this, After the companies work with us, 40% of the time they're raising money. Okay, so 40% of the time, post-engagement with this program, they successfully raise money. I've been in the investment business for a long time. That's a phenomenal rate. So we really do understand the process. We provide high value to the Austin area companies we work with, and then our students directly benefit from that experience as well. That's a little bit of the backdrop. This is one of the things I'll cover in the presentation as well. NASDAQ is a big sponsor of ours. Every year we take the winners of the graduate student investment competition and we open or close the NASDAQ. This is sort of more great fodder for them. Not only do they get investment money from us, a small amount of investment money, they get a lot of high visibility in the programs we run. Typically the NASDAQ feed gets shot to CNBC and Fox News and MSNBC and all the big news feeds. So it's great publicity and a great jump start for these companies. All right, so here's what I'm going to cover today. Okay, talk about big picture what we do, talk about the specific programs, talk about the accomplishments we've had, and probably most important for a lot of you, how you can get involved. A lot of the value we provide our students is in our interface with the Austin community, the startup community, the business community, and the investment community. All right, so first of all, what are we? We use a few key markers all the time. We get our companies investor ready. And what does investor ready mean? Investor ready means that they are very passionate about what they're doing, but when the questions start getting asked and the margin questions and how do you make money and what's your competitive advantage, and they have substantive answers. Okay, there's a little bit of this perception out in the world that, you know, as I like to say, give me a bag of cookies and a cup of coffee and, you know, 8 slides with big fonts and I'll kind of, you know, muscle my way into getting money. That's not the reality of how successful investments work. They want to see the passion in the entrepreneur, but when they poke and they ask questions and they want to know the details and the structure and how they're going to respond to the questioning they're getting, what the investors are looking for is cold, hard command of the facts, right? Investors want this odd combination of focus on a specific strategy combined with being open-minded enough to know when to zig or zag based on market input, and that's the kind of information we provide the companies in the accelerator. When it comes to students starting their companies through the investment competition, we provide the same content and the same experience. So as I mentioned, we work with graduate students from all schools. This is the first track, helping student-led companies get funded, and this is the other track, putting graduate teams into existing startups to get funded. The staff or the people who run Texas Venture Labs, myself included, have a lot of experience in the venture capital world, okay? I was an entrepreneur for many years before going into the venture business for about a decade before coming here. So part of the reason we're so successful and we're able to get these companies funded is we know what investors want to hear, okay? We know what the difference is for life science investors and what the key risks are there versus a technology investor versus a consumer investor. And if, as an outsider, there's this perception that all investing is the same, as the insider, it's very, very different, and we get them very attuned to what the differences are for their particular company. Our biggest metric and our key focus is the funding rate. Okay, and again, post-engagement, after working with us, outside companies raise money 40% of the time. Okay, we're up to about $500 million worth of funding after about 5 or 6 years of running the accelerator. And the key thing is we have no control over this money, right? We don't want to have control over this money. A lot of times people look at the university and say, well, why doesn't the university have a venture fund? In Austin, Texas, the university does not need a venture fund. There is far more money available than there are good deals or interesting deals for those investors. So we get our companies prepped and in front of those investors that have available money to put to work. Okay, within Venture Labs, there's 4 major things we do. Let me step you through those. The first is our Venture Partner Program. Shady, Jim, and John, this handsome group of people, along with Ann, help us get all the work done. Now, the interesting thing is John and Jim are both recent MBA grads who've been through our program. Shady came from the MSTC, Masters of Science in Technology Commercialization, which is part of the McCombs School of Business as well. And they've been through the new venture creation process and the TVL accelerator process. They spend a post-grad year with us, helping us do all the work. And this is a great program where we're able to cycle through some of our top students. And not only do they help us run our programs because they're fairly labor intensive, but they also get their chance to get their company off the ground. While they're working 40 hours for us, they're getting used to working another 40 or 60 hours on their own startup. They kind of sit in the catbird seat, get to see the interesting deals being done around Austin, figure out if they want to get involved. So it's a great program. We've had many successful venture partners come through and go on and sort of become part of the infrastructure of entrepreneurship in Austin, which is great. I like to think of it as sort of the electron cloud of resources spinning around Texas Venture Labs, and they're a key part of it. I mentioned the accelerator before. Let me talk through some of the details. And again, when I say accelerator, cross-functional graduate teams going into Austin area startups and helping them raise money. So typically what these projects look like. So graduate students are really good at dissecting and looking at the mechanics behind things and doing the competitive analysis and doing the research and doing the market validation. Entrepreneurs typically are more concerned about getting revenue, which is exactly what we want them to do, and raising money, which is what they need to do to keep their lifeblood flowing. So our teams focus on the facts, the data, the content behind the presentation. So what does that mean? As I said, we end up doing a lot of business research. I mentioned before, market validation is our big thing. Part of this process is we like to see 100 interviews in the target audience before the money gets raised. So if I'm going to go build a product, which is how most entrepreneurs think about it, we don't want them thinking that way. We want them thinking that I'm going to go find a market problem. If I find a good market problem, I should have many ways to address a product or service to hit that market problem. In the investment world and the world we live in, how you fix the problem is the easy part. The technology or the secret sauce or whatever is involved, that's the simple part. The harder thing to find and the rarer commodity is a market problem. We want market problems that are urgent, okay? High sense of urgency, ubiquitous, a reasonable number of people have them, and people are willing to pay to fix them. So that's part of our key discovery process. We spend a lot of time on business models. The typical entrepreneurial plan you look at has somewhere around 80 or 90% profit margin about year 2. And as you can imagine, that's just not the way the world works. So we have our companies do, our students do benchmark company profiling. We figure out what a reasonable profit margin is, what the cost of customer acquisition is, and help those companies raise money. Another thing we know from experience is most entrepreneurs think the hard part is building the product or service. And in our experience, that's about half the hard part. The other half the hard part is customer acquisition, right? Who's actually going to pay for it? How much are they going to pay for it? Why would they pay for it? Okay. Sometimes the biggest competition these companies face is customers not wanting to spend the money on it, and we want to know that beforehand. We do a lot of financial analysis, right? Something if you want to make an entrepreneur get uptight real quickly, say income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow, they get all nervous. But again, our students are good at doing that kind of thing. Sales and marketing models. How much is the cost of customer acquisition? What portion of that is actual sales effort? What portion of that is marketing effort? Are you a retail product that goes through distribution? Are you a corporate product or a B2B product that goes direct to the customer? We need to understand all that kind of stuff. One of the big things we focus on is business plan communication. You can have a wonderful plan, but if you can't communicate it and articulate it well, nobody's going to give you any money. So we help them get the message across. And then finally, funding strategy. Okay? Most entrepreneurs have very little experience actually raising money. If you look at typical media coverage on raising money, it's a false read. It makes it sound like it's pretty easy. So we try to line up what the company's all about, what the market's about, what the business model's about, and figure out the appropriate funding strategy. Once the appropriate funding strategy has been figured out, you build the presentation, you head out, and you find your investors. So that's what the accelerator is all about. How does it work with students and companies? So across the top, I've got our TVL students, many of whom current and former are in the room. We typically have 30 to 45 associates a semester, again, from various schools across the campus, okay? They are working with a team leader that's also in the class. We typically, the first semester, you work on a project with us. The second semester, you become a team lead, and you lead other students through these projects. So at the same time, they're getting firsthand experience helping a company raise money. They're also getting the experience of managing a team. They're also getting the experience of working in a cross-functional group, again, which is how most startups work. You're going to have scientists and engineers working with business people and lawyers. Many of our students also find that this is a good exposure to consulting. You'll see this later in the presentation, but a lot of them go on to work at Boston Consulting Group and McKinsey and other high-end consulting firms. And they use these projects as part of their interview process. Okay. So that's the student track. The company track, so these are local Austin companies. We typically have 10 to 15 companies a semester. They're across all kinds of different industries, consumer goods, services, life science, technology. Really reflects what's going on in Austin at a given point in time. And then at the end of the semester, and we're coming up on the end of the semester, and I'll let you know when the Venture Expo is at the end of this presentation, we take these companies, we gather in this room, and typically the room is packed with business people and investors, and these 10 to 15 companies have 10 to 15 minutes to present everything about their company to an audience, okay? And that's how we facilitate the fundraising process. So it's a great sort of very snappy, very well-run, tightly scheduled event that happens at the end of every semester. And again, at the end, I'll let you know what the current date is. We'd love to have all of you attend that. So that is the accelerator, a little bit more data on what the breakdown looks like. This is just a snapshot of a recent class. We had 38 associates. Those are the first time through the class, 7 principals. Those are the people who are the team leads, and 6 different schools and colleges from across the campus. Here's the breakdown, okay? MBA, MSTC from the business school. We have law over here, engineering, pharmacy, natural sciences. LBJ participated in this one. The School of Public Affairs. Again, School of Architecture. We cut across all in a typical semester. Over on the right are the local companies we worked with. There were 8 technology companies, 4 consumer product goods companies, and 2 life sciences companies. I'm going to point out a couple of these. The first one is Adam Mines, up in the middle up there. A professor from the School of Physics has developed a way to freeze atoms in place with a laser beam, okay? If you're into physics, this is groundbreaking stuff. Nobel Prizes have been won on this kind of stuff. And our job was to help them figure out a practical application in the industry. So we put our team on. As you can see, you need some good hard science people, you need some good business people, you need some good legal people, and we helped them figure out multiple paths to commercialization on this particular product. So that's a good example of an early stage company. Here's some great technology, what can I do with it? Another one we're going to talk about was a little more fun as far as the story anyway. It's about alcohol. It's a company called Beatbox. This is basically Franzia for 20-somethings, is what I would call it. It tastes like Gatorade with vodka in it, which is not particularly tasty. But Beatbox was actually, we'll see a little bit more on them in a minute. It was a team that met in the MBA program here at McCombs School of Business. They went on to compete in our investment competition. One of the founders was a venture partner for us for a year while she was getting Beatbox up off the ground. And then subsequently, when Beatbox had graduated, they came back through our accelerator process a couple times. And we've helped them, number one, in market expansion. You know, where should they go and how fast should they move? And then a second project we did was in product expansion. So again, these teams are working directly with somebody who's been through the program, high affinity to the school, directly contributing to projects. In a minute, we'll see how they raised money. And again, this is one semester. We run this twice a year, 2 semesters a year. Okay, scholarship competition. Interestingly, this is a program we run in conjunction with the MBA program. If you look at MBAs graduating today, one of the main reasons that prevents them from being able to start a company is typically student loan debt, okay? If you're graduate science, engineering, pharmacy, architecture, usually you have pretty good funding on your tuition. If you choose to get a business degree, an MBA, an MSTC degree, or a law degree, typically you take on a fair amount of student debt. When you want to go start your company after graduating, you typically have to sell your soul to somebody to pay down that debt. So one of the things we're doing to try to enable more people when they graduate start their companies is we actually run a scholarship competition in conjunction with Tina Mabley over at the MBA programs office. And what this lets us do is every year take our expertise in, number one, helping people get companies off the ground, and number two, running investment competitions. And as they're applying to McCombs, they can apply for a scholarship. These are our winners over the last 3 or 4 years. They can apply for a scholarship that they can apply to their MBA, okay? So number one, it helps overcome some of that tuition burden they might graduate with. The other great thing is it helps put University of Texas at Austin and McCombs School of Business on the map as far as innovative programs. Because all of a sudden, you know, the Wall Street Journal is talking about new ways to get a graduate degree, and we're part of that story. Poets and Quants, which is another big publication for people looking at graduate schools, covers it. So this has been a very innovative program. We've gotten a lot of good visibility out of it, and it's done wonders for, again, both the brand of the university in general and the brand of the business school in particular. Okay. Let's cover that investment competition I talked about in detail. Again, the idea being I'm now a graduate student. I want to start a company when I get out of here. How can we help them get off the ground? So first of all, this is our sort of claim to fame. Johnny Butler, who's here in the front of the room, was here when Moot Corp started. And many of you might remember the Moot Corp business plan competition. So we've been actually running this competition. We used Moot Corp as the basis to form Texas Venture Labs. We've been running this competition for more than 33 years. So we're really, really, really good at this. We were doing this back before it was popular. Now you can't walk down any street corner without hitting an investment competition. We typically cycle through 50 companies a year. We run this twice a semester, so that means each semester about 25 graduate school companies are applying to participate in the competition, which we run at the end of every semester. Again, it's coming up at the beginning of December. We'll give you more on those dates in a second. We've had about 1,000 companies through the system. Many of these companies have gone on to be very successful. I'll point to U-Ship here in Austin, Texas. If any of you watch reality TV, there was a reality TV show on, I think it was called Shipping Wars. If you are familiar with the software industry, we had a company called Furnace Software that was sold to BMC about 5 or 6 years ago. And again, more companies in the hopper, and you'll hear more about, you'll hear some in just a few minutes, but every year we're kind of pushing more companies out. The pool of potential successes gets bigger and bigger. We award just over $50,000 a year in cash prize money. Now, $50,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but there's a couple things to consider. One is it's an outright grant. We're not taking a position in the company. We're not doing all the legal paperwork. We're not taking an ownership position. And again, this is one of the realities of the startup world. if you wanted to take as small as a $10,000 investment, sometimes the legal paperwork is $20,000 or $30,000. So this is straight grant money to the company, and then they typically use that and parlay that into a bigger investment with other investors. We get to close the NASDAQ with the winners. Again, more on that in just a second. And we see a really high correlation between strong performance in the investment competition and outside funding, okay? Typically a little bit of money, a lot of visibility and publicity for that company lets those graduate students make a go of it for a year or two outside of school. And typically if you have some full-time attention to a deal for a year or two after graduate school, you will get funded. So that's the model we're following here. This is our most recent winners. Again, celebrating a NASDAQ. Novothelium was a health sciences company. Sandbox Semiconductor was a semiconductor company. Interestingly, both companies run by women. Okay, they competed. That was not by design. They were simply the best companies. And one won in the December competition a year ago. Another one won the May competition. So this is us closing the NASDAQ. And again, they are well on their way to continued fundraising in addition to the money we already contributed to them. Okay. I mentioned Beatbox Beverages. They're kind of our poster child right now. I am not a big fan of Shark Tank because it's reality TV, but I am very proud of these guys. The video is available up on YouTube. I'm going to show you the kind of the highlight here in a minute. But what you're not seeing is they were quizzed mercilessly by the sharks before they got their investment. What's your margin? What's your cost of customer acquisition? What's your rollout strategy? Okay? And they had extremely articulate, well-formed answers because they had answered the questions many times before in the coursework and the competitions and the accelerator of the work they did with us. So they absolutely smoked it when they were on national TV. Here, let me just show you what the highlight is just because it's interesting to see. This will be a video.
All sharks are still in. Beatbox Beverages has 3 offers on the table. $400,000 for 20% from Barbara, $200,000 for 20% from Kevin, and $600,000 for 33% from Mark. But Lori and Robert may also be interested.
I think you've got to blast off. You've got to go fast. Last thing you want is not being able to deliver, because viral is just that, right? And either you're there to fulfill, or you lose an opportunity.
I really appreciate you saying that, and that offer. Thank you for making it.
We didn't anticipate giving up.
That counter, just come back and tell me.
Yeah. So, would you do $1 million for a third?
Yeah.
All right.
Deal?
Ready?
Wow. We're really excited.
Congratulations. Let's party.
Can we do work?
Yeah, let's do work, baby. That's it.
All right, so a couple things. Again, you didn't see all the background where they were ruthlessly quizzed and their numbers checked. The other thing is it takes a lot of confidence and experience to talk back to Mark Cuban on national TV, and then to actually get him to agree. So that was quite an accomplishment on the part of that team. The other question we always get asked is, what's Mark Cuban really like? And the answer is, with these guys, he's been absolutely wonderful. Okay, he has lived up to everything he said he'd do. One of the things you don't know about Shark Tank is they kind of make a quick deal on TV and then they leave it up to all the details to get fixed, and frequently the deals fall through. Mark went out of his way to stick to everything he had said. He's been highly supportive of them. And when I'm meeting with them and they have a question, they text Mark and Mark responds. So anyway, really good guy. Rumor is he might be running for president, but we'll wait and see on that. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the accelerator, some of the accomplishments. Okay, now we're shifting gears. We're outside the investment competition. We're in the process where we're working with outside companies in the Austin area. So first of all, at this point, we've been running the accelerator about 6 years now, a little more than 6 years. We're on semester 12, semester 13, if you think in terms of academic calendar years. We have more than 150 alumni startups. Again, our biggest claim to fame is 40% receive funding after working with us. We're not counting people that already had the funding and then we're jumping in. And after they work with us, to date it's been $491 million in post-TVL funding. I think that number is actually up by about 20 or 30 million. I think it's over 500 million at this point over the last couple months. And there have been 6 acquisitions. So this is an amazing success rate, again, for something that's only been going 6 years. So we're very proud of these companies and look forward to continued success here. One of the things we do, when we started 5 or 6 years ago, we were one of the only accelerators in Austin. Right now, there are about 40 of them. So it's a very popular field. We're very careful to differentiate ourselves from any of them. And we actually work with all of them. So we've changed our company recruitment strategy. We now go to the accelerators and say, hey, what are your most interesting deals? What are the ones we can help the most with? And again, these accelerators, based on our success rate and their desire to work with the university, usually help us find their best deals, which we then go work with. So these are all great relationships for us, but again, how we work out and leverage the outside ecosystem. Some of our other accomplishments on campus is we've done a lot with the accelerator to help commercialize UT technology. Many of you might know the Office of Technology Commercialization, which is part of the University of Texas at Austin. The university, being a big research and development institution, receives a lot of grant money to do outside research. And we work with these companies and these professors and this technology to figure out what the commercial applications are. I had mentioned Adam Mines before, okay? This is the Office of Technology Commercialization who holds the patents for the university. Adam Mines was a company started by a professor based on his research. Obviously, with Dell Medical School here, we've opened ourselves up to a whole new area of domain experts in the life sciences area. We're seeing life science deals expand dramatically in Austin as we speak, which is great. I've mentioned the MSTC program, of which Shady is a graduate, and I see many MSTC alums and current students in the audience here. We work a lot with them on commercialization strategies, School of Engineering, and other resources here in Austin. A little bit on accomplishments on the accelerator. We pull the students who've come through the program once they're out working in the commercial world. And what we found is 39% of the students who've come through our program end up working with companies with less than 25 employees. Okay, so their eyes kind of get open to what startups are about. Sometimes the companies they've worked with in grad school actually end up hiring them. A lot of our students also, if you look at some of the hard sciences and engineering, the typical pathway is get your Ph.D. in a field of science or engineering and then go do research or go to a university environment. We're seeing a lot of them go to more commercial jobs. We're seeing them take product management positions for technology products. We're seeing them work for consulting companies like BCG and McKinsey. So it's really expanded the horizons of the options a lot of these students have to work outside classic research field. The other question we asked them, and this has been some great results, one was, how influential has TVL been in my career success, and how influential has it been in the type size of companies I applied to? And as you see, this is agree and strongly disagree, and this is sort of neutral. So the majority of the students feel we had a direct impact on either their working environment or the career they have chosen, which is great. And we continue to stay in touch and engage with these students on a regular basis. And here's just an example of the kind of places they go. As I mentioned, we've had many go to companies we've worked with. Video, Datacol, and others will hire some of the graduate students. Many of our graduates have started startups. And again, many end up going to corporate positions. Apple and Boston Consulting Group are a couple of examples that are up there. Okay, other things that TVL has, Texas Venture Labs has really helped Again, for the university in general and McCombs in particular, we recently received the Roundtable Innovator Award, which is a very prestigious award given to the most innovative MBA program out there, and we were the nationwide winner. We get a lot of coverage in Poets and Quants, which is kind of the go-to place for anyone looking at graduate business degree programs. We get highly rated in that. They do a lot of stories on our students. And then we get mentioned regularly in a pretty innovative publication here in Austin called Austin Inno. They're regularly covering the companies we're working on and the kind of work we're doing. So it's been really great fodder for, again, the business school and the university in terms of expertise in entrepreneurship. Also, many people contribute to McCombs ratings. Obviously, it's a big school with a lot of successful programs, but we like to think ourselves as helping, particularly the entrepreneurship rank, steadily climb, which helps in recruiting, and again, it becomes a virtuous circle pretty quickly there. Little bit of word on our sponsors. One of the interesting things is we have outside sponsorship, so we do not, quote, cost the university money, which lets us do a couple things. First of all, it lets us have great staff and sort of the work capacity to pull all these programs off. The other thing it means is we don't have to charge the companies anything. Okay, so we don't have to charge them fees, we don't charge them equity. We contribute sort of pure intellectual horsepower that helps them get funded. And here are a list of some of our sponsors, individual sponsors at the top, and some of our corporate sponsors down below. So just want to recognize them and point to the benefit it provides us and our companies. Our primary benefactor is a gentleman by the name of John Brumley. He is whom we are named after. And if you notice Rolling Hall, the graduate business school building going in behind here, the reason these curtains are blacked out is that building is almost complete. We'll be moving in there actually next month. And in that building, Texas Venture Labs is the anchor tenant on the ground floor. Okay, we have a lot of companies coming in and out, a lot of business people coming in and out, a lot of students coming in and out, so there's going to be a lot of activity on the ground floor. And then additionally, in recognizing Brumley's, we're going to put an accelerator space on the top floor. Okay, so those graduate students that want to work on companies or start companies, they're going to have a dedicated space. It's a very modern building with some great views and some great architecture. And that'll be happening over the next month or so. We'll be moving in. So the next time we talk to you, hopefully we'll be talking to you from Rolling Hall. Let me just close on this slide and again, be thinking about questions you want to ask if you want to start stepping up to the microphone, but how you can get involved. Let me talk about this. So first of all, we really value the Austin ecosystem. We've been very closely in line with it, and we feel many people contribute, including many of those of you who are in the room. Let me talk about how you can get involved. First of all, in that first major bullet, investors and business people, if that's who you are now, we would invite you to judge and mentor in our TVL investment competition. Okay? So typically the first week of December and the first week of May, we have that investment competition. We're typically running 20 to 30 companies through it. We have many judging rounds. We typically need 50 to 75 judges to cycle through. We're always interested in people who, number one, have entrepreneurial experience. Number two, are interested in investing. Number three, have good business perspective and are interested in giving back to the university. Other way you can get involved is to attend our Texas Venture Labs Venture Expo. That is the presentation from the accelerator companies where they're actively raising money. Again, that also happens typically the first week in December and first week in May. So these are sort of the obvious ways to get involved right away. And I'll be talking about those dates in just a second. If you're a graduate student or student, I know there's many of you sitting in the room here, there's a couple things you can do. First of all, you can participate in the investment competition. You can be one of those companies that's competing for that money. There are a number of different courses you can take that prepare you for that investment competition, although those courses are not required. We really encourage you to do that. The courses will help get you educated if that's what you need. If you have a strong business background or startup background, you can go straight to the competition and do well. Okay? And then also, if you're interested, take the TVL Practicum. That is the course name for the accelerator course. So if you want to be on one of those cross-functional graduate teams, that's the course to get into. And we would work with you on that in a classroom environment. All that said, a couple fine points. The TVL investment competition is coming up Friday, December 1st. All right, how many in here are grad students right now? Okay, so all of you should seriously think about participating in that competition if you have any idea of getting a feeling for what it's like to raise money, okay? I noticed that most of my active students also raised their hands, so noted. I'm glad to see that. But that is coming up. That's always a great event. And again, outsiders are welcome, or non-students are welcome to participate in that. It's this Friday, December 1st. I'm going to point you to the website if you want the details or check in with any of us up at the front of the room. We're glad to provide you details to either compete in it or attend it. Other thing we have coming up is the TVL Venture Expo. Those will be the accelerator companies we worked with. They'll each be pitching 10 minutes on a very tight schedule in the afternoon. That is on Pearl Harbor Day, Thursday, December 7th. Both of these events are finished typically around 5 or 6, sometimes a little later, but there's always a networking and cocktail event afterwards as well. So there'll be active entrepreneurial students, business people, investors at them, so it's a really great event. Details at this URL, feel free to take a picture of the screen. I'll leave it up during Q&A. We also have a newsletter that goes out once a month that will highlight activities of our companies and also any upcoming events and how to participate in them. So that's the end of the structured part of this. I'd love to open it up to Q&A. Do you want to go ahead and step up to that microphone? That would help us quite a bit. Looks like.
Yes, so I'm actually a life sciences graduate student, and I had some questions about the accelerator program in reference to that.
Please.
First, I was wondering how you select your students to be a part of the accelerator program, and then whether we play a particular role or if our role is kind of synonymous or the same as the role that the MBA students play.
Okay, so life sciences, we have a tremendous number of great life sciences people who come through. For students, it is an interview process, so we have more demand. We have plenty of demand, so we just like to find the right kind of person who's motivated and understands what the program's all about. We spend a lot of time educating you on what it's all about, and then we have a few group projects we ask you to get involved in. So the selection process is rigorous, but typically, like all things in life, if you stick with it and prepare, you will do very well. I would add that a lot of our natural science graduate students, one of the things we're working with the school directly on is they had a high placement rate into academia, and they want to diversify that beyond academia. And we've had, we typically have 5 to 10 CNS students a semester, and many of them go on to, some continue in academia, but many of them move on elsewhere. As far as the work you're doing, everyone's doing the same work. There's no specialization of work. There is specialization of field of study. So if you were a natural science student and we were working on a life science project, you would probably be the expertise in chemistry or biology or whatever involved, and then you'd be working side by side with business students and engineering and law students, and there's a lot of cross-pollination going on amongst the students. In a classroom environment, we also deliver you the material you need just in time. So for instance, if we were doing market validation and you were doing it in your company, we'd give you a lecture on market validation Monday nights. That's when the class meets. Then you'd go do that work over the next couple weeks. The next time through we were doing financials, you'd do that work over the next couple weeks. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But we treat you all the same. And then just to answer the next question you have, because I know how you're thinking, when it comes to grading for the class, we make sure that all schools receive the same curve as the overall class. Do you know what I mean? So you would be graded in the class, but then we'd make sure all CNS students receive the same proportion of grades that were equal to the overall class. All right, so see, we even work a little statistics in there.
Thank you.
Thanks for the questions. Yes. Yes, sir.
Hi. So I was kind of interested, again, from the accelerator perspective on the startup side.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about kind of how you qualify startups that would be interested and kind of the process that they go through to get in the program.
Sure. So how we qualify the companies, we open application process. We look for companies with a high probability of funding, right? And what does that mean? That means that there are some full-time resources devoted to the company. It's not a wild idea somebody had and they're trying to get students to work on it for them. So there needs to be some full-time attention applied to it. Sometimes the companies have raised money, sometimes they haven't already. And we would interview them much like any investor would, with an understanding that we don't expect them to necessarily have investment, if that makes sense. And then we would group you into one of two buckets. One would be the pre-revenue companies, the atom mines we saw earlier, where they have an interesting market opportunity or interesting technology but haven't really fully developed the business yet. That's one bucket. The other bucket would be companies that are already generating revenue and looking to expand or raise more money. That'd be more the beatbox example. And then each team, consisting of CNS students and others, would participate or work with one of each category of company. Does that make sense? So if this is my team of 3 people or 4 people down here, they would be working on a pre-revenue company and a post-revenue company, so they get exposure to both kinds of companies. Typical number of companies we take a semester is, I'll call it 15-ish, and we typically have applications maybe double that. And then also what we do is if we will encourage people who don't make it one semester to continue applying, and then we also help the companies if there's anything we can help them with in the application process. So we do a reasonable amount of hand-holding if that helps your application process at all. Great. Yes, sir. Oh, come on up. Yeah. I'll tell you what,
Hi, Rob. What are the key common traits or backgrounds or so forth of the winners of the investment competition? What sets them apart?
Are you trying to get the inside edge for Saturday? Is that?
No, never.
Okay.
Genuinely interested.
So first of all, current students, can you just raise your hands? Okay. So these are some current students, many in the MSTC program. We have an investment competition, the classroom version of it, coming up this Saturday. We're going to take many MSTC grads who've already been through the program and have them judge. We'll have outside investors judge, and that is the classroom competition that in turn, if the students choose to, leads to the next competition. What we see in the investment competition is very similar to what you see in the outside community. You see companies that have well thought out ideas, that have done their market validation, that have developed a reasonable business model, have put in the effort to substantiate the business they're going after, with the understanding that any startup is a high-risk environment, and it's not considered, there's no reason to be perfect. You just have to be cognizant of what the realistic expectations are, what the challenges are, and how you think you can be successful. So very similar to the real investment process. The difference is, even by participating in it, you'll get a lot of mentoring, you'll get a lot of help, you'll expose your deal to a lot of different people. But good question, I would say it points to, it is like any investor with a little bit more of the high attention paid to help nurture the company. Thanks for the question. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name's Dave Petrozinski. I'm a local entrepreneur. And I was in the high-tech world, moved to sustainability, environmental sustainability. I want to know if you are looking at all at the nonprofit sector and starting up organizations on the nonprofit side, and how you're doing that, if you are.
Yeah, so let's talk about nonprofit or sustainability or triple bottom line. socially responsible. We have worked with many companies like that. I'm, a bit of a capitalist by background, and the thing I like to remind people is that any good nonprofit or sustainable company, I'll use a nonprofit example. If I'm a nonprofit company, first what I do is I form a corporation. Second, what I do is I get tax exempt status. It doesn't mean I'm not profitable. It just means my taxes are not are not taxed. So we like to take companies like that and do as much as possible to show the sustainability model or to show the profitability model or the social give back model, because just like any investor, the investors want to know what the return is. So depending on what approach they're taking, we'll help. We do work with them and we try to emphasize where that return is generated and take all the stuff we talked about and apply that in the environment of sustainability.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have a percentage of how many of your companies are like that? How many companies are in the nonprofit zone?
Well, all of them are in the nonprofit zone. I'll just leave it at that. How's that?
Good afternoon. If you could spend a moment and tell us what opportunities exist for the business community of Austin to engage with TVL.
So business community, there's a bunch of different ways. First of all, if you have a startup, okay, go here and please apply to the accelerator. Okay, that's step one. Step two is, if you are a business person or a business, I'd point to these three main areas. Okay, we need judges and mentors. We'd love to have you attend our Venture Expo, and we'd love to have you refer quality startups to our accelerator. So those are the primary ways to get engaged. Beyond that, if there's any specifics, probably best if we just talk afterwards, talk to somebody up here, and we can get into specific questions. I'm going to move over to here for 1 second. Yes.
Hi, Rob. Judges and mentors, so are you looking for all different kinds of people, or do you have specific requirements, or do you just judge individually about who you would like to choose for that?
That's an interesting question. Well, we have a couple criteria. Number one, we need somebody with, we look for certain business expertise. So for instance, if you came from the consumer packaged goods, we'd probably have you help us judge that track. If somebody came from the technology space, we'd probably get help on that track. If somebody was an attorney, or a salesperson, usually that's more generic skills that can apply. We have a fairly large pool of people because we need a lot of help, and we don't want to burn anyone out in particular, so we tend to kind of rotate people in and out. And then it sort of depends on what else they're interested in doing. Some people like the Venture Expo because they can kind of come in, take a look, and choose to get involved in companies they find interesting. Other people want to just be in the classroom or the competition just to see a whole bunch of deals up close, if that makes sense. Did I answer that question?
Thank you.
You bet.
Hi. I guess you're probably already aware that one of the areas of the medical school is putting in place programs to facilitate translational medical research. Mm-hmm. And there are also other programs being set up there to place new startups nearby this. So I'm very curious to know at this stage, you mentioned Dell Medical School, do you have any concrete examples of how your program has engaged already with the medical school, and maybe what your vision is in the future as these new startups start to emerge, how you would engage with them directly, both in terms of this and maybe even if it's possible to engage some of the medical students themselves?
So that's a great question. It's really integration with the medical school. So first of all, since the medical school's been here, we've had, I'm going to guesstimate 3 or 4 actual, maybe closer to 5 med school centric deals come through the accelerator. So number one, we're actively pulling those through and working with them. Number two, we're in the process of making these courses available to the med school students. You know, they're kind of in their first, the first class is just coming to the point where they're going to be able to take electives. I know McCombs is working to make these electives available to them. So the good news is we're trying to embrace the entire process they go through. They also have their own internal startup help they're looking at, and we know all the sort of players on that front and try to minimize the duplication of effort between the two programs.
In terms of companies that you select for the accelerator program, do you differentiate at all between those that are wanting to go public or sell at end date or remain private as organizations?
Good question. The main differentiation, we don't care what the exit plan is. You could think it's one thing and it could be something completely different in the 5 to 10 years it'll take to get to that exit. So we're indifferent as to what the plan, the current plan is, because we know it's going to change. The only thing we're really looking for is companies that need to raise outside money. You know, if you're running a consulting business or a bar or a landscaping business where cash flow tends to be fairly quick, it's not the kind of thing we're good at. We are very good at something that does require some form of outside capital. You know, just as an example, you know, one of the things we work with is, you know, there's multiple forms of outside capital, right? I can get equity or I can get debt. Reference that was made here, if I take investment in the form of equity, which is a classic venture investment, that means I either have to sell or go public to satisfy those investors.
Right.
If for some reason you knew you didn't want to do that up front, what we would probably push is more towards a debt structure where you wouldn't sort of have somebody else forcing a liquidation event at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll take that into consideration, but we don't use it as a judgment call as to whether you come into the accelerator or not.
Okay, thank you.
Great question, thanks.
Hello, hey, so I was just wondering why this was restricted only to graduate students. Because my company, we just won Blackstone pitch competition, and I feel like I could definitely compete with my partner against other graduate students. So I was just curious as to why that was restricted.
Well, because the Blackstone program is so good and so focused on what you do, we think it's great. We'd love to have you come back to grad school, and then you can compete with us. How's that? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. If a company has a sound business and it's already in existence, but maybe lacking some marketing strategies, lacking you know, whatever it lacks, you know, to get more exposure to the market. Right. Do you have a program that helps improve that? Or?
Absolutely, and I would point you directly to the accelerator program. You know, we work with companies that might have $5, $10, $20 million in revenue generation and are looking to expand. So yeah, we help with that all the time. The example I'll use is Beatbox, just because we've been talking about it. You know, they're on a, let's call it a healthy 7-8 figure run rate. So number one, we help them figure out where to expand, okay? Which, you know, sounds straightforward, but if you look at the alcohol industry, there's all kinds of a 3-tier distribution system by law. There's federal laws that have to be conformed to. There are state laws that have to be conformed to, you know. You can't sell 3-liter packages in Florida, but you can in Texas. And you know, you can't be within 3 miles of a school in Colorado, but you know, so there's all these rules. So it's not just expand, you gotta expand systematically, okay? For instance, we help get them into Walmart, okay? But getting into Walmart sounds like great business until you realize that, oh my gosh, we really need to get into Walmarts near universities because they tend to buy this kind of product more than anywhere else. So we help them systematically expand. That was one expansion project we did for them. And then a recent project we just wrapped up about 6 months ago was they were selling big jugs of wine, and they wanted to go to smaller, more one-serving packages, and we helped them figure out that strategy. So they went with Tetra Paks, and we helped them find a co-packer. And then Tetra Paks, the smaller things, also have many regulations. So for instance, we got to realize that if we could actually reseal the Tetra Pak, it's a different category of alcohol than something like a can of beer where you open it and you can't close it. So even though, you know, they were well on their way, had a healthy run rate, they still needed plenty of help expanding. It sounds a lot like what you're talking about. More than happy to either talk to you or have you apply online. Love to hear more. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Will the investment competition be available to students in the Steve Hicks School of Social Work?
It is currently available to graduate students in the Steve Hicks School of Social Work. So come on down and catch up with us afterwards. We'd love to recruit you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right.